Oz. Hello everybody, it's Fat Man from the Holler. As usual, if you like my videos, please hit like and subscribe. So as you can see, one of the molds for casting lettuce came in, and I'm going to show you what it is. It's a 12 gauge slug mold, and it's for doing 7-8 ounce slugs. So as you can see, we're going to open this up. And I'm sorry to my reloading people who watch me on YouTube. I'm sorry I do a lot of gaming and other things and music, but I always try to get caught right back up and keeping everybody up to date on what's going on in my little reloading world. And here we go. It shows, it says right here, new, always tight, left hand screw to loosen, turn clockwise, tighten counterclockwise. And it shows you, and this mold looks a little bit different as you can see right here, but we'll get into that momentarily. And as you can see, it shows like the bigger Lee melting pot like I had that actually got damaged from using wheel weights, because I use wheel weights that got junk in the bottom of it. It's got that little metal arm right here, as you can see, and what you do is you slide it up, you put your mold under it. Once you can set the mold on top to get it good and hot, and you slide it under to let it drip in. You push that rod. When you pull up on it, it gets the lead coming out of the bottom of the melting pot. But mine's messed up, so I had to pour it, and I also use a smaller one. And I'll show you guys some of the hardships of doing that, you know, hopefully next week when it warms up in the 50s. But we're going to continue. And here's something important for everybody when you're casting lead. It said, caution, your bullet mold will be damaged and your bullets will be of poor quality and less lubricated, as in step 4. And you know, a lot of times I've cast a lot of bullets and stuff for 50 caliber, and sometimes they get little cracks in them and stuff, but then I'll recast them. But I've also been studying that, and I didn't know a whole lot about that you actually have to lube some of them. But I believe the lube is going to be probably similar to like a gun lube. And I'll do some research on that, but I have homemade black powder lube that might work, or I could probably use golf wax, beeswax, and stuff of that nature to make a lube. And it gives you different diagrams for, like, if you flip the back of it, it gives you your charting for shell type of Federal Gold Medal, Winchester, Federal Gold, Remington, Winchester, and all that. And then when you get into it, it talks about the type of powder, accurate, Hodgdon, universal, which is great because when you use this one right here, you can actually use that in pistol reloading. You can use it for pistol reloading, and then in your shot shells, you can also use it for doing slugs and shot. Primary lead shot is what the information that I acquired, but everything gives you the instructions of it. And I showed you guys the box. And I'm not going to go through all the boring parts of it. We're going to get right into the parts of this that matters. Here's something that came with it that kind of shocked me, which is a 2.cc used for measuring powder and stuff like that sort. Here's something you need to know about these. And I've done some little research, and they say when you clean these after having powder in them, to use some Dawn soap and have lukewarm water, and then as you dry it, to get rid of the static as you're drying it, they recommend using a fabric softener, which of course that makes sense because, you know, when you're doing black powder, it is a reactive element. So like if you're making firecrackers, you don't want static electricity or stuff of that nature. So that is a safety issue. And then when you're casting the lead, you want good ventilation, etc., stuff like that. So I always like to provide people with that. And the second part of casting lead, have a good face shield. I actually bought one for doing grinding and casting lead versus just a pair of sunglasses, because you can protect your whole face, which is pretty important, because I've actually had lead explode from a wheel weight, and it's not very good, not very super painful being hit with a little piece, but it did put, when I pulled it off, it actually ripped skin out and made like a pock mark, you know, kind of like it's a skin imperfection. But yeah. And the other thing is, when you handle lead, you may want to invest in some cheap gloves. You can buy them on Amazon or Harbor Freight or Walmart or just about anywhere. Wearing you some good gloves, and then when you're casting, it gets really hot. You probably want to put gloves on your hands, because I mean, my hands are kind of not good with heat, but I can handle certain amounts of heat. So I want to say the protective parts of good ventilation, the PPE gear, and being very resourceful and careful how you deal with it, because like, don't have this lead around children and pregnant women, etc. So that's all ended. We're gonna get into checking this mold out. And here's the mold. And it's a little bit different than all the other molds, because see, when you close it, you have this right here, and you pour the lead into this. Okay. When you open that, as you look at this, I thought the mold was slightly strange, because I was like, what is this? It looks like a rifle slug. And then I got to looking at it, and as you look at it, you can see it has a journal. So when you close this, and it has right here on the nipple, on the housing of the mold, you can see it goes together like so. And then you can see the journal on the inside of it, which is a line where when you pour it, spreads it equally through both sides, so you can make your mold. You can make your mold for your slug and all that. And the other thing is too, for some people who don't like to have their hands hot, you can actually loosen this screw, and they do have extensions for Lee if you want a longer handle. But for me personally, like when I'm pouring, like I'll use the small melting pot that's like, I don't know, maybe a pound or two. I'll just pour it this way by hand. But if I ever get another big 10-pound Lee melting pot, or even a smaller one where I can actually use the rod, all I have to do is have it set and flush, and then you pull the rod, and then it'll drip down into it out of the hole in the melting pot. So that's fairly enough from that. And melting pots have went up significantly over the years, kind of like everything else. When I bought my first melting pot, I was doing a lot of fishing in the Missouri River, and I didn't want to buy lead, because when I was buying, like, you know, just figure I go to Bass Pro and I buy 5 lead weights. They cost $5, $10 for, like, I'm talking like maybe 4 to 6 weights, and I mean they're teeny, and that's unacceptable. So I started doing the lead thing. When I bought the first melting pot, it was 80, and now they're up. Then they went up to 90. Now I see them, they're running probably about, I'd say on an average scale, just for helping you guys identify some pricing and some ideas. A 10-pound melting pot, like I have the bigger one of the biggest one Lee sells that I've seen commercially, or best about anywhere, they're running about $88 to $119, and you can actually purchase it in multiple places like Amazon, because you guys always know that I always product link my stuff. It's through my Amazon affiliate, so if somebody would buy this, I'd probably roughly get maybe 20 cents. And doing the Amazon affiliate, I've been doing it for a while. I mean, I've been doing it since July, and I've made roughly $1.74. But anyway, you can buy these you can buy a lot of stuff from like Cabela's, Bass Pro, Sportsman Guide. And if you pay for a membership, you can get stuff a little bit cheaper that way. It's located, I believe, up in Minnesota. And then there's Cheaper and Dirt in Fort Worth, Texas, that sells ammunition. It's a little bit of reloading stuff. Then there's Midway USA, which is located here in Missouri. And there's a store roughly probably 15, 20 miles away from me, down I-70 at the Midway exit out on the edge of Columbia, Missouri. So there's multiple places you can go. There's also another, you can also deal with Lehman, Lyman, and then they have Precision. And then over in Mexico, Missouri, there is Graff & Sons. So I definitely like to provide you guys with some options, because for the guys starting out that don't have a lot of money, they might want to do it on a budget like me, like the Johnny Cash, you know, building a Cadillac one part at a time, etc. We all know that. So there's definitely options. And then for maybe some of the more advanced people that are into reloading and casting, etc., they might want to go to different places. And I mean, these molds are actually getting pretty crazy. This mold was actually purchased because I actually use Microsoft Rewards points, and I build them up by logging in and asking questions on Bing. And then it takes me about 3 months, and I might get a $20 gift card, which is 26,000 points. And that's a whole other thing that's pretty good. And then I applied for a Visa card through Amazon for my business account, which is Fat Man from the Hog Creations, which is my physical location at my home, which is a little mini flea market that I do during warmer weather, and also do a little bit of online sales. So I really try to provide you guys with the best information that I can, because some of this information I've learned in this process I've actually had to independently learn. And then there's always, no matter how much you learn, there's always more to it. And I think I'm going to start using lubrication when I do casting, so the lead doesn't stick. Because sometimes I don't think it's actually a 100% thing you have to do. It just tends to stick a little bit. And like when you're casting, you kind of got to bump. When you have it open, you kind of got to bump it to knock it out, just like I showed you. So there's no BS in what I do, and I'm not doing this for any organization or business. I'm just doing this as a hobby and to provide some good content on YouTube. And I know I get a little off the subject, but I really try to stay on there because I like to be very articulate and detail driven to help everybody on YouTube make the best decisions upon purchase and stuff as they get into the hobby of casting. And hobby casting is a good thing. And the thing is, with the casting, if you're a fisherman, you can make your fishing weights and different stuff, and you can make your egg weights, and then you have a piece of copper where you stick it through the hole, etc., and you can make all your stuff. So, I mean, the lead melting thing is definitely a crucial thing, especially if you're off the grid or that type of nature stuff. You make your fishing weights, and you can make your own ammunition for different calibers, like 45 ACP, 45 long Colt, and I have those molds. And then also making 50 caliber black powder and 44 black powder revolvers. So that's my initiative of doing it. And I found you can use wheel weights, but they tend to have a film on them in the metal housing, and then when you melt them down, you just get sludge, and then you get a bunch of crap in the bottom of it, and you have to dump it out, and you have to take a screwdriver and scrape it so it doesn't pop and blast on your face like it did me. And then there's other ways to get lead too, like if you can find old farms like I have done. I have a lot of friends, they bring me lead from old farmhouses, and you can actually melt that down. And it might require using a grinder to cut it in sections to where you can actually get it in the melting pot. Or let's just say like old doors from probably the 40s to maybe the 70s. A friend of mine brought me about roughly probably out of an old door, I'd say roughly 20 to 50 pounds of lead out of an old door. And then I ran into a guy that had to be evicted on a piece of property, rental property with my family. And then he left us a bunch of batteries, and I had to collect all the battery housings, throw it in the recycle center, because I don't want to throw none of that stuff, corrosive stuff, anywhere. And they didn't have corrosive because it's all drained, it's just plastic housings. So I found a bunch of lead on the ground. I was like, what is all this? And I got to looking at it, and I took a magnet to it, and I realized it wasn't steel, it was lead. So then I took my ladle, and then I just started pouring it all and making it look like a half a baseball in my ladle. And then if you don't really want to mess with buying a Lee melting pot, there is another option. So don't be scared of that. If you have like a old steel container, like a witch's kettle, what I call it, like we used to cook all the fish in the fish fry. We'd have a witch kettle, and you just chop your vegetables up and stuff and throw in there at the fish, and we'd cook kind of like a stew, and then we'd strain a lot of the water off of it. Kind of like a stir fry, fish fry, kind of a gumbo, but we'd get rid of a lot of the water off of it. So that's the thing. But anyway, you have a witch kettle, and what you do is you put all the wheel weights in, or junk lead, and then you have it all inside the witch kettle. And then what you can do is come back with like a turbo torch like you use for plumbing to sweat the bead. It's not going to be quite enough of a torch. You can go to Harbor Freight or different places on Amazon and get you a torch head, and it comes with a line. And what you do is be very carefully, and I'm not responsible for anybody getting hurt or any of that type nature stuff, but you hook the line to a propane tank you can get from anywhere, like a local gas station. Once you connect the line, you have your torch head. take a lighter, you light it and you adjust it, and then what you do to the kettle or steel container, you heat that up, and when you heat it up, all that lead is going to initially melt, and all that plastic and everything, and all the steel of the wheel blades is going to drop, and then at the very top, all the lead is going to come out. And when you first start pouring it, you're going to have a teeny little bit of film and slag in it. And then usually, if you have a little ladle, you can actually scoop that up and just put it in a smaller ladle or a spoon, or just about anything from a yard sale spoon or anything, or old junk spoon. You just get that little sludge off there, just let it set and cool, get it out of the way. And then you can start pouring it into your ink shots or your little ladles and stuff like that, and you work it that way. And that's just another option, because there's always more ways than one to do stuff. And I mean, if it was let's just say we're in a survival situation off the grid where we don't have propane or a torch head or electricity for the Lee melting pot, which is about 750 watts. And if you break that in half, it's actually 350. So technically, you could almost melt lead on a stove, but you wouldn't really want to do it in your house. But anyway, we're on off the grid. We have no electric. We have propane. We have no propane. What we can do is we can take rocks and make a fire, just like a fire pit. You take rocks or blocks or what have you, you make a fire pit. And if we have a piece of spanded metal, we lay a piece of spanded metal over the top. We put our kettle on it with this lead in it, and we heat it up over a fire. And then we can use our ladle, and we take our ladle, and then we pour it into our mold, and we cast that way. And I'll give you a very good dictation of it. Dictation of it is the movie The Patriot, where Mel Gibson's sons are fighting in the Revolutionary War and they get killed, and then Mel Gibson starts taking the little lead soldiers down and melting them down in a ladle, and then he'll melt them down and he'll pour them in a cast similar to this. Not this cast, but you know, that's what's going on. That's a more of an off the grid type way of casting by using a fire. It's a little more primitive, and you may have to work with your fire temperature to get it to the right increment to where the lead will melt. And lead melts, you know, 750 watts, and that boils down to like 300. It's like 750 watts, and 750 watts in degrees is half of that, so it's like 350 degrees lead melts. And then some of the hardest elements on the face of the earth is like tungsten and stuff like that. And then if you're and here's another tip about this: if you want a heavier bullet, and you say you have a good furnace for melting stuff, what you can also do is you can make pewter. And to make pewter, it requires a little bit of chemistry and the right amount of elements. And how that works is when you make pewter, it requires 3 elements that is pretty easy to get. And those elements will be lead, tin, and copper. Lead, tin, and copper, it makes pewter. And what pewter does is when you make pewter, it makes the bullet a little bit heavier. And the bullet being a little heavier, you can use your calibration tool and proper methods for creating the pewter. What you're going to have is a heavier bullet, and then you're going to have a better penetration and a little heavier velocity. And then if say you're using a black powder, you know, if you use a little bit, like if you're shooting light loads, you might up your powder to a little bit, but not maxing it out, just up it a little bit, and trial and error. You can look it on YouTube, and since we have the internet and lights and stuff, we're on the grid, everybody's semi on the grid or what have you. You can actually get some information from online forums to acquire your proper load data. Some of my load data, I do it a little differently because I understand a little more in some categories about different kinds of reloading. Like when you'll have like your green dot powder, your red dot powder, and then you have your paradox, and then Hogdon, and all them different types of powder. What the deal is with the recipe, what happens is certain powders burn faster, slower, and then it's kind of like the ignition of the primer. If it's a slower primer, you can use a different powder. If it's a faster ignition from the primer, you want a faster burning powder to ignite the shell that shoots a projectile. So there's a little bit of science in this, and I really don't have to get over analytical, but I do love to provide excellent information and things that I've learned in my process of doing all these things. And if you like my video, hit like and subscribe. And as always, from Fat Man from the Holler, much love and much success for everybody out there doing reloading or thinking about getting into it. Just use your head and use your budget and shop carefully and try to utilize what you're wanting to do. If you're a duck hunter, a deer hunter, think about what you're doing. If you're a deer hunter, you're going to use a slug. If you're shooting bird, small game, you're probably going to use a lead. So anyway, much love and I'm out.